Welcome back to the Other Side Lifestyle with Jim and Aram. Today, we have a very special guest, the man whose life was changed the night of his bachelor party when he was picked up by Dennis Rodman and put on stage like a tiny piece of shit, even though he's an adult male. And that's when he became the great doctor that he is today.
It was in that moment I decided I needed to pursue a career in psychology to better understand the psyche. It was a weird day.
Can we have a better person on? Like anybody that's spent any amount of time with Dennis Rodman belongs on this podcast. I don't give a shit what you know about psychology, psychiatry, Xanax, behavior change. The fact that you survived the night with Dennis Rodman and can tell the tale, which he won't go into details on, ladies and guys that listen to this podcast though. But he does have a lot of nuggets of wisdom for you.
Yeah, we got the readers.
It was a bizarre night. And it was a whole night. We kept thinking at any moment he would kind of just ditch us and he would literally stand up and he'd be like, all right, let's go. I mean, yeah, it was. Do
you ever have somebody and you're like, listen, I know you have a lot of problems, but I hung out with Dennis Rodman and you're not nearly as fucked up as that guy is.
You know, it's funny. I haven't used it, but now just based off of the first few minutes of this conversation, I feel like I've really missed out on an opportunity and I should be leading with that.
Yeah.
I should just put the pictures up like behind me. And so anytime somebody pops into Zoom, they would see in the background, they'd be like, is that you and Dennis Rodman? That's weird.
What are your credentials? I don't see any of your degrees up there. See that picture of me with Rodman? That's my credentials.
Yeah.
I survived that.
Yeah.
And I can help you survive your panic attacks.
Anything. There's nothing you're not equipped for if you've handled that kind of night.
Between that and listen, I started my career working in inpatient settings with all severe and persistent mental illness. And we were 50% forensic. So half the people I saw were involved in the court system in some way, shape, or form. So, I mean, for lack of a better description, the criminally insane. Yeah. So either people had done something and were found not guilty because of a mental illness, or they weren't competent to stand trial, and then they get civilly committed and they're sent to be stabilized. So I spent almost 10 years working in that kind of a setting. So I get some interesting stories here and there. It's not what I do now, but you
miss it. Not at all. Rob, you're going to say something.
I was just going to kind of intro him and how I found him and why he's here and, the usual stuff to get people acclimated to the gentleman at hand. So linked up with another podcast guest, Kate Callahan, who was a presenter at the Real Coaches Summit, who puts out some of the best work out there when it comes to behavior change. Upon immediately looking at his page and seeing that he's got a lot to say about the stuff that bothers most of our audience, which is, why can't I get this to stick? And I think that's really the problem that anybody has when it comes to anything that they're trying to figure out. So I thought, who better to have on than to have an actual person who not only is licensed to practice this type of stuff, because we talk about it too, but we don't have the credentialing for it. So I think sometimes when you hear it from somebody who actually has the credentials, it holds more power. So folks, if the stuff that he talks about today doesn't give you the space to allow yourself to believe that you can change, hire him just directly because that's going to be the final straw there. So thanks for coming on the show, Josh. I appreciate it. And you'll have to excuse me. Today is chaos.
Just going to bring up, what nobody knows is right now, as Aram did that entire intro, there's a man with a stud finder in his hand behind him, hanging up a flat screen TV. Yeah. There's two things to learn here. One, Aram doesn't give a shit. He'll still do a show with the guy working behind him. And two, he does not know how to hang a TV, which I think is the bigger lesson here as an adult male nearing 40, has to hire somebody to find a stud. Do you have a drill or like a hammer?
I do. I have both.
Oh, that's awesome.
Do you know where they are? And are they?
Yeah, they're in a green bag in the room next to me. But that's not my area. I like to stay within my scope of practice, Josh.
You're trying to maximize your time,
right?
Yeah, Josh. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I appreciate the intro. And it's fun because I've only been doing Instagram and podcasts like just over a year. It was all kind of almost a little bit of an accident. I went on, I think you guys might know him, but I went on Jordan Syatt's podcast. I know Jordan from like, forever ago. I mean, like he was in like a youth group program, and I was one of the like, trip guides. And so, so I've known him for a long time. And when I went on his podcast, I don't think I realized the audience he had.
Yeah.
And so kind of went from there. And, it's interesting because obviously there's a lot of mixed things about, about using media and using social media. But this is like the nice side of it, right? I mean, the nice side of it is if you cultivate it in the right way, and it's not just picture after picture of like, look what my friend that I haven't talked to since like high school had for lunch. If you cultivate good content, it's addictive because it's inspiring, and you see all this like positivity and real talk. And so it's been a side of it that I never would have expected, but I've connected with a ton of people I never would have met otherwise. Doing a lot of things to try and help people and figure out motivation. And it's a really cool side of it. So when I started checking out what you guys do and put out there, I was like, oh yeah, I mean, it's half of what I do is talk to people about how do you figure out your own shit? How do you figure out, like, truthfully, like, not what are the hurdles that a book tells you are the hurdles? Like, what are your hurdles? And that goes for everything, for health, nutrition, for life, for happiness. Like we're fed so much BS about like what we're supposed to want or supposed to do or the path you're supposed to go. And it's just not for everybody. And so a lot of people, it's figuring out like, how do I get out of this like pre-put together kind of overlaid rule system that's based on nothing. It's nonsense. This whole like, oh, you go to high school and then you get a job, or you go to college, then you graduate and you either go to grad school or you get a job, like, and it goes through this, like, then you meet somebody, then you get married, then you have, it's this bullshit timeline, and it doesn't work for a lot of people. And people spend tons of time trying to say like, well, why isn't this working? Why isn't it making me happy? Why isn't because they're trying to do it somebody else's way. So a lot of what we do overlaps completely, because if it was just a fitness recipe, right? If that was it, if somebody just needed a very clear, like, do the following and you'll get the results you want. If that's all we had to do, it'd be great. But like, I think so much is out there right now that kind of says, this is the outcome you want, but we're not going to show you what it actually takes to get that. And so it creates this really, really, like, honestly, it's depressing. Like, it makes people feel constantly like a failure because they're being compared against like an unrealistic, like, non-truth.
Yeah, there's like that dichotomy of like wanting to show before and after pictures to show people, hey, this is possible. But like me and Aram, neither one of us put that stuff up there because we know it's an instant transformation in that image. And it does not tell the whole story. And no matter how many times, even if you were like, read the whole caption for their whole story, this and that, somebody could read it and be like, that's so inspirational, but it's still in their mind, this instant from that to that. And as soon as they're not seeing a result towards whatever they're pursuing in the time that they have arbitrarily made up in their mind, they're like, why am I doing this? And it's the same thing in other aspects of their life, like the things that you're dealing with. And that's why it's so analogous, fitness to life. It's always more than nutrition. It's always more than fitness, but you can wrap your head around doing these things for yourself and showing up for yourself here. It can and will bleed into other areas of your life.
So, Josh, one of the biggest social constructs that I think our clients suffer from is the problems that they have when they're talking to their loved ones, to their friends. Like, here I am on this journey. I'm really trying to remedy my behavior, but I feel like I'm in this environment where I can't be set up for a success, or I'm getting all this social pressure. Like, why aren't you eating this? Or why aren't you drinking that? Like, why are you making these decisions? Why are you going to the gym on a Friday night versus going out to drink? How can people start to deaden some of that noise and be loyal to a process, regardless of what kind of the cheap seats are saying to them?
Oh man. All right. So how much time we got? I mean, the bottom line, right?
17 more minutes. Hurry up.
Perfect. Well, good news is a lot of it boils down to like giving fewer fucks, right? I mean, trying to figure out a way to just straight up say, like, if people are going to be judgmental or obnoxious, or, most of the time that's about them. It's not about you. And so what sucks is that in a family system or like a friend group or a community that's existed for like some length of time, they're resistant to change and they want people to play the roles that they've always played. So if in your family, you've always been the peacekeeper, the go-between, right? If you're the one that like, no matter who's fighting, you're involved in it and it's your goal to help. If you one day say, you know what, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do it anymore. Like, you know, if these two people in my family are fighting, I'm not going to do it. There's huge amount of pressure to keep maintaining that role because it benefits the system. And so
family first, family
right.
first, like that kind of stuff. We've been friends for 20 years and this is blah, 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 blah.
And so it ends up being that if you try and change that pattern or system, people are going to keep pushing you to be like, stop doing that. Why are you doing that? That's ridiculous. Because really what they want is the system to stay the same. And if you remove yourself, they or the whole system has to adjust. And very often, especially if it makes their life harder, then they're resistant to it. So even that goes roommates, partners, right? If you decide, hey, I want to start going to the gym, well, that's time away from home. And if that's harder for your partner, right? If you're the one who makes dinner or you're the one who like, you know, puts the kids to sleep and you're like, hey, I'm going to be out for an hour and a half. There's almost immediate pressure to not do that because it will make that other person's life more difficult. And it's a really hard thing to break free from some of those patterns when it's guilt, it's shame. So some of it is wanting to keep things the same. The other part is I think people can be fairly nasty. Nasty is not the right word, but like
it's selfish but it doesn't come across as selfish. It's like, I don't want my environment to change, so I'm going to do everything I can to stop you from changing. And it's totally selfish, but it comes across almost as I'm looking out for you. Why are you trying to change?
Right.
It's like this gaslighting, which I hate the word in this kind of a scenario, but that's kind of what it is.
Well, it's become a buzzword, but it's a real thing, right? I mean, there's no joke that this like, how do I put it on you? And for a lot of people, there can also be kind of like ego defensive like components, right? Meaning, what does it mean about them if they're not doing it? Right. So it's one of the things I run into with, because right now I part-time, I do, 2 days a week. I have a private practice and where I do more general work. 3 days a week, I work in a pain clinic. So I work with all various different types of chronic pain. And what I run into all the time is if you have somebody who's dealing with chronic pain or dealing with an injury, and for a lot of people, if they're dealing with it chronically, they have no interest in showing that. It's exhausting. It's exhausting to be in pain all the time. So then if that becomes every conversation, every topic, people put a lot of effort into not showing it. But the problem is what happens is, so let's say I tell people that I have all this stuff going on, all these issues, but if I'm doing more, right, at work, if I'm doing more than a colleague, well, they have to run into one of two things. They have to look at it and say, okay, well, Josh is outperforming me and he says he has this chronic pain issue or he had this injury. So they have to make a choice. They have to decide right there, hey, what does it mean about them if they're being outperformed by somebody who has a challenge? And their options are either to say, shit, like I'm not pushing myself, I'm not doing enough, or they have to believe that that other person isn't in as much pain as they're really saying, that it's not as big a struggle as they almost want to bring that other person down.
Yeah.
So in a family system, a community system, a relationship, if somebody's trying to change their life, better themselves, do more, if they're giving up that Friday to go to the gym, if they're making better or more conscientious food choices, the people at that table, some people can be your cheerleader. Some people can just be like, this is awesome. You get full support from me. Some people are like, oh, it makes me feel bad that I'm having nachos, wings, and fries, and you made a different choice, which means either I have to make a different choice, or I just have to accept that we have different goals, or I need you to stop doing that because it's making me feel bad. Yeah. So people will push you to like not do these things. Well, just take the night off just because they don't want to feel guilty.
And then how many people, and I've had this conversation with clients ahead of time who are really hitting the stride where, yeah, your friends are going to support you until all of a sudden it's like, oh, you became successful. And then they say, I specifically remember two clients where I told them this and it happened because they kept going and it became a lifestyle. Like they're going to support you now. And then all of a sudden it's going to be, you're getting too into this. Like they were waiting. They supported you because they knew you were going to fail, quote unquote. And then you didn't. And it became a lifestyle. And they're like, you seem a little too into this. And then they try to sabotage you to bring you back. Like they allowed it for a period of time. And then they try to bring you back to it. It's crazy. It's wild.
Well,
I don't even want to say crazy. It's wild.
It's going to sift out. It's going to sift out kind of your true, real close friends, the people who truly support you, and the people who have their own insecurities enough that your success and your changing makes them feel badly or weird or different about themselves. So when I mean, I know I jokingly say give fewer fucks, but the reality is it's realizing that sometimes people will say nasty, hurtful, like rude things, and they don't even know it. But it's usually about them. More often than not, it's about where that person is, whatever's going on with their journey, whatever they're like, and that they're not secure enough. It's the people who in your life who are really, really self-confident, really self-assured, know what they want, aren't threatened. Those are the people that are like, that's awesome. That when they say, hey, is that too much? Are you going too far? What they mean is I care about you and I want to make sure genuinely you're not taking it too far.
Yeah.
You can tell when it's somebody being like, hey, I'm excited for you, but like, are you okay?
Yes,
is this too much?
Absolutely.
You can feel it when somebody says those exact same words. And what they really mean is like, okay, you're taking it a little far.
Yeah.
No,
I
mean,
lost my old Joshy.
Right.
That I was used to. Like, I didn't think I really lost you, but I lost old Joshy.
Change is so hard. And especially when there are so many different things that kind of are pushing you towards whatever is the easier path.
Yeah. Do you have specific tools? Because I feel like this is said a lot. People say, just you can't worry about what other people think. We say this stuff a lot. And even if we believe it in those moments of their words, their actions are just a reflection or a projection of themselves onto us, and we hear that and we know it, we still have the emotional attachment to it. And we still get sucked into that person's whatever words or actions. And we think, I don't want to lose this friendship. Are there tools outside of just flipping the switch of not giving a fuck? Are there tools that you would help, that you could give to somebody who maybe is in the middle of this and trying to figure this out? I want to believe it, but I'm not there. I haven't been able to flip the switch to not give a fuck and just focus on me and still care about that person who might be trying to bring me down.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a bunch of stuff that we can go over. I think some of it is what you're talking about. It's important to differentiate that, it's most difficult for people who are more of a natural empath, people who are natural caregivers, who are really sensitive, very much pick up on the needs of others, who tend to prioritize people around them over themselves. Because somebody who's not, right? Somebody who has no problem being like, if a friend says, hey, you want to go out to a bar, and you're like, no, I'm going to the gym. And they're like, come on, don't. Some people have the self-confidence to be like, you can do that all day. I don't care. I'm not going.
Yeah, it's like how I don't go to the strip club at 3 a.m. with Aram.
Exactly. There you
go. No, I'm going to go to bed. I'm just kidding.
You're like,
I'm just kidding. That's never happened. That's never happened.
No, but it's an easier no when you're confident in it.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. And this is why I don't pressure him. I don't pressure him because I know it doesn't serve him, and I'd much rather have them to myself.
Yeah, well, and he gives me a quick handy so I can go home relaxed.
There you go. I mean, nice. There it is. And we've now uncovered the tool. Yeah, I mean, that's
my tool in his hand. Yes. It's hard to get back on track when we throw those things out.
It was all downhill from when.
That's our challenge. That's our challenge to our guests.
But no, but I think, that's it. That in some funny ways, that's a great example. Right. Yeah. It's a great example because it's an area that you don't have any
wiggle room.
Right. And you're good. Happening. You're good with like, no, I don't want to do that. And truthfully, it's a sign of a good friendship and a good, if one person could say, hey, will you come do this? And you could be like, no. Yeah. Or like, sure, but I don't want to. And you're like, okay, great. Because then you can actually say thank you.
And I've given that example of like, if you don't do heroin and somebody's like, cool, you want to do some heroin? No, I don't want to do heroin. But we we haven't convinced ourselves enough of our potential lifestyle change and created that identity for ourselves that it's so easy to get sucked back in to, come on, have a drink, live a little, this and that, da da da. But somebody's like, want some heroin? I don't want fucking heroin. We have to have that same confidence in our identity, our new identity, if there's a attempt to have a new identity.
So that's the challenge, is it's making sure you know what you really, really want, truly and honestly, and trying to develop that without everybody else's voice, right? Without all of those other, like, well, what about this? What about that? Try this, try. No, the more you're clear on what you want, the easier it is to hold tight. And, I think that in terms of like how to not care, one is trying to, like, I tell people all the time, write it down. Write down what your goal is. Like, don't have to recreate it every single time. Like if you need a reminder to give fewer fucks, write it down. If you have a specific friend that tends to just needle or poke you the wrong way, like, have a notepad on your phone that you can open up that it's like, hey, when Jimmy says X, remember that's hard for him.
Like, make your wallpaper say, tell Stacy
like
to shut the fuck up.
Middle finger. Exactly.
Tell Stacy the specific individual is your wallpaper. She's like, is that about me? It's like, no, that's somebody else.
You're like, no, it was a totally different person.
No, it's Stacy's mom. Stacy's mom.
I think that, like, the more confidence you have with what you want, the more honesty you can have with yourself, right? Because the people who tend to struggle are the ones who kind of want the outcome and the timeline, but don't want the work. Mm-hmm. Right. And some of that comes from all of this, like, those before and after pictures, that misinformation, right? Like, the whole notion of like having a six pack, when people say they want to have a six pack, and I'm like, I very often will be like, wait, do you mean a visible six pack?
Yeah.
Like, because lots of people can have it. Like,
everybody has a six pack.
Right. There have been times in my life, not right now, but there have been times in my life where I definitely had that abdominal definition, but you couldn't see it. But that's in part because I have zero interest in putting in what I would have to do. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's what I've said
that
before.
Would make me unhappy. I want the strength and the, and I don't want to go to reach to pick something up off the floor and be like, oh, did my back that's what I want. Like, I want the functional strength. I'm past the point where I give a rat's ass what I look like with my shirt off. But also, even when I was at that time, I didn't want to give up, I didn't want to give up what I would have had to.
That's what people have to get honest with. I feel like a lot of people, they want to look good in the party atmosphere. They don't really want to give up the friends, the happy hours, the weekends, the barbecues. They don't want to give up that stuff. They want to show off in those spaces, and they're not willing to admit that they don't want to give those things up. And it's like, well, what do I got to do to get that without giving those things up? And that is a hardcore conversation that people have to have with themselves. It's not going to happen. Like, you look at somebody like Aram, but we talk about partying and stuff like that all the time. It's a rare occurrence for him. It's not something that's happening all the time. If you just listen to our podcast, you'd think he's partying every weekend. He doesn't. His shit's tight 95% of the time, So that's why he's able to look that way. And then he could still, if he wanted to, post a picture of him having a drink, which he doesn't. We joke about the stuff on here because it's serious stories and it's funny. But it's like, those things are rare occurrences. It's not his lifestyle. Those are special occasions. And people want that lifestyle with the body of the person who's not living that lifestyle. And social media and things like that do paint that poor picture, or they have that friend that appears lean. They wish they were built like them. That is at all those parties. And I'm like, you don't know what's really going on. You cannot be jealous of one aspect of their life. You have to be jealous of every aspect of their life.
And nobody's ever doing that deep dive to audit or ask somebody like, so what? It's always like, well, what diet did you do, or what workout are you doing to get that, like, to the other? It's like, no, ask me like what my day-to-day life looks like. Like, if I ever have the opportunity to be in front of somebody who's super successful, my first question to them is not like,
what was your trick?
Yeah, like, what was your trick? It's like, when you wake up in the morning and when you go to bed at night, what happens in the middle of those two events? And I want to know everything that you do.
Or it's like, what was the transitional event that happened that maybe catapulted your life? What hard decision did you have to make that might have been the, like, catapulting decision? It's still a hard decision. It wasn't some trick like, oh, this was the thing, and going from there. But so go ahead, Josh, with like what even the tools that maybe you would say to that person that they could start to, I guess, either whether it's conversations or actions. Is it simply they have to practice the action of standing up for themselves to get used to it? Is it more of a reflection thing, or practices and writing things down and having these conversations with themselves? And I know it's not, everybody's going to be different with what it might be, but are there ideas that people who are struggling with this identity of, I want this change, maybe lifestyle wise or body transformation wise, but I also still want this. They're maybe in that balance, and they're starting to realize through these conversations that, okay, maybe I'm not all in like I thought. What things would you maybe ask that person or challenge them with?
I think, I think for one, it really all comes back to being super, super honest with yourself about what you want, how much time you're willing to put into it, and is it sustainable? Right? Because that's the big issue.
So let's say I want it. I want it. I really want it. I really want it. But it's just so hard.
So then the next question becomes, right, like, well, if you want it, how do you start to fit it in, and at what pace and how often? And because people like to set themselves up for failure, right? They set themselves up
100%,
with this kind of well, here's the goal, and they hit the ground running. Like years ago, I
told you it wouldn't work. I told you it wouldn't work. Yeah.
I did. Oh my God, what was it called? P90X. You remember that?
Oh man, that guy's still kicking with that black hair. I don't know if it's getting gray yet, but he's
trying to remember it. Tony?
Tony? I wanted to say Tony, but then I want to say Tony Robbins, but it's not Tony.
So
Robbins,
funny. I was going to say Tony Horton, but I think that's also not. That's it. I think
it is.
Holy crap! I never remember names.
I'm going to Google it. I mean, you go ahead.
That could be a steakhouse for all we know.
It is it is a restaurant. I'm looking at P90X.
Tim Hortons. Shit. Well, anyway, but so my point with that is only that, like, yeah, that was a great thing at the time, but there's no way that's sustainable. And so, I think when people are looking to figure out a change,
Tony Horton,
it is. Oh my God. Not even kidding you. I'm like so bad with names that the fact that stuck in my brain is like, oh, great. I can't remember where I went yesterday, but I can remember that name. From,
Anthony Sawyer Horton Jr., born July 2nd, 1958. All right. So P90X, not sustainable.
Does it say, like, on his Wikipedia, also hangs out with Dennis Rodman occasionally?
No, it says that. I looked up you on Wikipedia and I did see that.
Oh my God.
If that was the only thing in your Wikipedia
with the last
page.
Name Smith, if I have a Wikipedia page, that would be unbelievable. But so realistically speaking, I think that, like, one of the big things I tell people all the time is you gotta take a look at a bunch of different variables, right? One is, where can it fit in your life? The other is, especially for people who tend to be sensitive to the roles that they're in, the people that they're helping, whether they have kids, a spouse, work. How do you label needs and wants? Right? Because functionally speaking, a need always outweighs a want. Right? Like, if I go to the doctor and my doctor says, I need you to do blood work, like, okay, well, I know I need to do that. And if they're like, oh, and I want you to check out PT, or I want you to check out, okay, like, one is a necessity and one is a suggestion.
Yeah.
The problem is, people who tend to be people pleasers chronically mislabel their need as a want. So they downplay that. And so the challenge becomes, there are also a lot of people who chronically mislabel their wants as needs.
I think that's the bigger problem.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to eating habits, that's where the problem occurs. It's like, somebody told me this yesterday, and she's a client of mine.
I need cheese with my eggs. I need cheese with my eggs.
I need a dessert every night after dinner. No, the fuck you don't.
Yeah.
You want a dessert.
I want a dessert, which is also totally fine.
Absolutely.
Correct. But be honest with your words. Words matter.
That comes back to the honesty, part, right? That's like somebody totally randomly saying, honestly, if you put a bag of Stacy's pita chips in front of me, I'm going to eat all of them.
Yeah. Well, it's like if there was no dessert in your house and all the dessert places were closed, what would happen to you that night? I'd probably have to kill myself because I need it, or I'm not going to sleep. I guess I'm going to be up all night. I can't go to sleep without it.
Well,
that's a great point.
But that brings in the shame component. So I think what happens is, here's the problem. Let's say you have set aside your time that this is where I want to do whatever form of exercise legitimately I like. And I get there are a lot of people that just don't like exercise. That's totally fine. Then what you're looking for is what is for that person. For some people, that's why they need something at home, because it's too hard to like, that's the lower hanging fruit. For other people that are like, oh no, if it's in my house, I don't even want to be home. So they prefer, it's doing that work to figure out what really works for you. And if you've set aside time regularly to go to the gym, the problem is, I think for a lot of people, or nutrition or any of it, they label that as a want, not a need.
Yeah.
And the problem is, so let's say
and we feel afraid to tell people that they need it. It's like, because we don't want to tell people how to live their lives, but it really is a necessity. Like, we just didn't exist in a sedentary state in prehistoric times or even 100 years ago. We just didn't
you
exist.
were constantly on the move.
Constantly. And, I mean, they're giving out amphetamines to housewives to keep them going all day. Nowadays, maybe a housewife is sitting around the majority of the day. 60, 70 years ago, they're go, 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 go. It was like a full-time active career. It's just different now.
Well, I mean, and you still got a lot of people who are stay-at-home parents who are like nonstop, like,
correct. I'm not saying all of them, but try picturing a housewife in 1950 just sitting on the couch watching TV. Like, it's not even an image that we can imagine. Correct. It was a different time.
Different time.
Yep.
And I think that
not a judgment, just an observation.
No,
you know,
the issue in my mind is that, like, let's say if I've set aside that, like, hey, it's easier for me to get to the gym after work before I'm home. Okay, well then great. But if I put that, so first off, I tell people all the time, put it on your calendar.
Yes.
Like, please, for the love of all things, put it on your calendar, because people tend to put on their calendar only necessary items, like a doctor's appointment that they can't forget about, or like, which means any of their personal care time is often blank space.
Yeah.
And if it's blank space on your calendar, then when a friend says like, hey, can you bring me to the dentist? Like, well, you look at your calendar and it's open. And mentally, that was time for you, but it's like, oh, now the guilt comes in of, and especially if this is a friend or family member, partner who, like, the airport is, I always use that as an example because it's always like it's such a heated topic of like driving somebody to the airport. But so if you set aside a couple hours of self-care time, I don't even care if it's exercise, it doesn't even matter. Like, just 2 hours to be by yourself, to read, to go for a walk, to work out. If that's blank, and if Saturday morning you were like, okay, that's the 2 hours I'm going to exercise. Well, then if a friend calls and says, hey, I need you to take me to the airport. Well, if you were looking at it and going, I wanted those 2 hours to myself, not I need. So now you're not weighing a need versus a need. You're weighing a want versus a need. The problem is it's reversed. It's dead wrong. You need that time to yourself. Your friend wants you to take them to the airport.
And most of the time you're giving up that need for yourself. It's not for something like an airport ride. It's for something like a brunch. Or a happy hour, or Netflix, or I can squeeze in my self-care in the last 30 minutes of this 2 hour block, and then out the window.
And so a lot of what I tell people is, please. Sorry.
I was going to ask you about the whole idea of self-care, because I think we have a very misguided view of self-care now in our society today. Because I think people use food and alcohol and all these other substances to soothe. And they do it under the guise of self-care. Like, well, this is just me, like, relaxing and taking care of myself. Right. Which is fine. I mean, listen, I think as Jimmy just downs an inordinate amount of aspartame that's obviously going to give him cancer and kill him tomorrow. And
we talked about Diet Dr. Pepper recently. We thought it was our favorite.
I know.
I like to drink it out of the glass because it's classy.
It's Dr. Pepper Zero Cream Sugar.
Of all the diet sodas, it's one of the ones that does not taste as diet as certain diet sodas.
No, it doesn't. But like,
certain diet root beers also like mask that. Yeah, A&W is the way to go.
I think people use the thing of like overeating or overindulging or over drinking or like extreme, like sitting in front of the TV for 6 or 7 hours as this form of self-care, because the other form of self-care is active self-care. It's, I have to read, I have to meditate, I have to sit in silence, which is really hard for me to do. I have to journal, which is an activity as opposed to me just doing nothing. So differentiate between the two and talk about how to maybe help people shift their perspective on what self-care can look like and make it a little bit less daunting.
Self-care is going to be different for everybody, obviously, but like what you're talking about is that we get really hung up in this binary thinking. It's all or nothing. It's win or lose. It's right or wrong. Like, it's that, yeah, I love to eat while I watch TV. I really do. But I have to be honest with myself that is just an enjoyment. That is a like indulgence.
And even
and
it's
also
who I am. You hear that kind of stuff a lot about behaviors.
That's where I think, people get really caught up in beating themselves up about it, or the shame guilt cycle, where it's a like, well, there's this TV show I love and I know I'm going to watch it and I really want to eat something. The second they get into that, like, well, then today's a loss.
Yeah.
Once you get stuck in that binary,
right,
then like all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, it doesn't matter if I have 15 wins. If I have one loss and the day is going to be registered as a loss, then what's my motivation?
Yeah.
What's my motivation to do anything differently? It's that same idea of like, right, if I decided yesterday, hey, you know what, I want to give up like candy, like not all sugar, just I want to stop eating things that are just sugar. Well, if I go into work, and there's a bowl of Hershey's Kisses out, right? The brain very naturally, like it's these automatic thoughts goes, ooh, candy. Okay.
We just talked about what you resist persists.
Right. So what happens, this internal narrative, the problem is if in my brain, I go, no, I cannot have that. Right. Picture this almost like two different characters in the brain, right? You have like the intellect or the cognition, and then you have this unfiltered character who just says whatever they want. Well, if the intellect says you can't have that, the unfiltered character who just says whatever goes, yes, I can. Like I'm an adult and I have arms and it's clearly for everyone. And if the intellect keeps saying, nope, absolutely not, that character will get frustrated and go, okay, hey, listen, you're not reasoning with me here. So I'm just going to prove to you that I'm right. And I'm going to go funny that
we'll do that with ourselves, but we won't do that with our friend.
Yep. We won't do it for other people, right? And so the challenge with the Hershey Kiss example, and then I'm going to come back to that one, but like, is that, well, now I have this internal struggle in the brain and I'm going to eat 3 or 4 Hershey's Kisses. And then all of a sudden that's when guilt kind of walks in the room and goes, oh no, what are you doing? We don't even like Hershey's Kisses. And it's like, oh shit. Yeah, I don't really. And they're like, if we were going to blow calories, why wouldn't we have like saved it for something we love? And everybody's like, oh yeah, how did we get in this situation? It takes training the intellect part of the brain to say, when that unfiltered part says, ooh, candy, to go, yeah, candy's delicious. But we're trying not to do that. And if we're going to waste calories, we should waste it on something we really like. Yeah. That will get that motivation to go, oh, right, way easier now to say no, thank you, because I was honest about it. I didn't bullshit myself and pretend that it isn't delicious. Like I was honest about the fact that like, yeah, of course it's good, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's like the person who kind of wraps their head around the stuff like, I don't want to waste my calories on alcohol. I'd rather eat my calories. When the person gets into that mindset, I don't want to waste 300 calories in alcohol when I can eat it and it gives me more enjoyment and I feel more content, feel more proud of myself, any of those things.
And all those are legit when you come by them honestly, right? And so it's just a funny thing because now if I eat those Hershey's Kisses and if I basically say, well, that's it, I failed. I was going to start my new diet today. And the first thing I did in the morning was I failed. So then today's a fail. Every decision I make for the rest of the day doesn't matter. End of the day, it's a failure. How am I going to eat today then? Because I'm like, well, and here's the other, now I'm going to say like, oh crap. And it's Friday. And like, I like to go out on Friday or like Saturday, we usually get takeout. So this weekend shot. So like we should start Monday. And then it's like, oh wait, but I have this work thing on Monday. And it's like, all of a sudden I ate 3 Hershey's Kisses and I've delayed my diet till Tuesday.
Yeah.
All because
like my birthday's next Saturday. What's the point of going Monday through Friday if Saturday's my birthday celebration? It's funny amazing. You say that. It's like amazing. I've said before, like people, there's like, like every type of thing. There's 2 types of people, winners and losers, this or that, whatever. There's 2 types of people with the way your day starts. If your day starts horrible, there's the people that go, I guess this is how my day is going to go. It's a loss, or at least I got the hardest part of my day or the shittiest part of my day out of the way. Now I can move on and have a great day. There's 2 ways. Our perspective is such a driving force in how we handle every one of these situations. And it's like and I think people, they need to acknowledge that this could be a forever struggle and a forever conversation. Do you see that this could potentially be like a constant conversation, and be willing to have that conversation with yourself?
Constantly. We do this daily, like in every single area, not just in nutrition and exercise, but like, should I do this? Shouldn't I do that? Constantly. And we're only aware of the ones that give us any sort of kind of internal cognitive dissonance. Anytime you have that feeling of like, oh, I feel torn.
Yeah.
That's where like, people struggle because, so let's say I get invited out on a Friday night and I'm like, you know what? I know it's the right thing for me to not go, right? That's not what I want to do. I want to go to the gym. Well, here's the problem. If those don't line up, if I'm like, oh, but I really feel guilty that I'm saying no to my friends going out. Now what happens is the brain says, uh-oh, I feel two different things. And it says, well, if I feel guilty, maybe the right thing to do is to go out. And then immediately you go, nope, I know that's not the right thing. And it's like, well, but if it's the right thing, I shouldn't feel guilty. Well, but I do. So what ends up happening is my brain will chase itself constantly trying to figure out which one is it. It's this state of torment. And yeah, it's nice when things line up.
I think it's the person just doesn't want to hear the shit. They don't want to hear the shit from their friend versus guilt. They'll say it's guilt, but it's like, I just don't want to hear the shit and have to explain myself and justify myself and blah, blah, blah. I'd rather just go instead of explaining all this. I can go Saturday morning. I'll do Orange Theory at 8 a.m. I'll be fine.
Well, and people want to know which is the right choice, which one's right. And the reality is there's no right, right? They're both right. You can feel guilty that you're not going out and know it's the right thing to stay home.
Yeah.
You don't have to get them to line up.
Yeah.
You just have to gain some comfort with the fact that like, yeah, I have competing ideals right now, and I'm going to pick the one that's better for me. And in terms of motivation, people want to will themselves to have more energy, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I won't go through the overly long version, but the model I use all the time is I use an example of a cell phone battery and say, kind of like, imagine if you have your own internal battery. Right. And we charge our phone overnight. And the hope is you wake up at 100%, like your internal battery. The problem is like, and when I talk to people who have chronic illness, I describe it as like, that's like pulling your phone on and off a battery all night long. So some people have the capacity to wake up at 100%. Some people, a good night's sleep is 80%. And that's okay. But then life is like all of the apps on your phone. You have a finance app, a relationship app, you have a health app, and they drain your battery. And the problem is, I think we all do this internal calculation all the time, right? Like, so, it's kind of that, like, if you're driving home at the end of the day and your battery is at, 15%. Well, if the phone rings, we look down, we see it, we do a quick calculation. If this person's in a good mood, they can boost me 5%, but they can cost me 20. So their range is +5 to -20. If I'm at 15% battery, I'm not going to answer the phone, right? Because I can't risk it. Now, the problem is if I have a guilt app, that opens up, it's going to take 5% of my battery because I feel badly I didn't answer the phone. So just because my phone rang and I didn't answer, I'm at 10%. At 10%, your phone goes into low power mode. It shuts down non-essential applications. And all of a sudden, that's where people, like, if you've ever been like at an event or party or work and you hear somebody say, I got to get out of here before I say something I regret, it's because they're low battery. Because we all filter what we say to some degree. The more professional the setting, the more serious, the more we filter, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And so so it's more fun when you don't have to use that battery for your filter at all. But like at work, you might have to.
It takes more energy.
Right. But the problem is, so like if you're at the end of your day and somebody comes up that you work with and asks you for the 7th time the same question, what goes through your head is, you got to be kidding me. Like, you asked me yesterday, I know, but you don't say that. Like, you engage a filter and you try and have it say, I know we had just talked about this and an email went out, so I'd recommend you go check that out. That drains my battery. If I'm low battery, the first things I lose are filters, right? So I can't control how something's going to come out, and any of our own shields, right? Any of our own, kind of healthy defense mechanisms. So whatever other people say, it hits you directly, because we all have these vulnerable spots, and we use those strengths or those defense mechanisms to kind of hide or shield that vulnerable spot. So if I have no shields, all of a sudden everything feels way more sensitive. And so partially what I go over with people is kind of you need to start taking a look at what drains your battery, what charges your battery. Is there any low-hanging fruit? Are there people in your life that you are donating 10% of your battery a day because you've been doing it for the last 30 years? And if there's a week where you're busy or there's something going on, you can't keep donating battery to that person. With motivation, if there's things you want to do, you have to take an honest look at your battery. So the example I used to use this with ironically is a gym example. When I was in grad school, there was a gym I used to go to, and I would say realistically, I needed 15% battery to get to the gym. If I didn't have 15% battery, I couldn't do it. Now, if I got to the gym, I got back 20 to 25%. So it's really only like a 5 to 10% bump in my battery. And some days it was neutral, or maybe it was only a 2% gain. But here's the challenge. What happened is all of a sudden at the end of this strip mall, there used to be this little tiny convenience store. They sold it and they put it in a huge grocery store. So it took up a bunch of parking and it became a big draw. All of a sudden, parking was a pain in the ass. People would park up on curbs
to get to the gym.
Right. So what happened is it messed with my algorithm.
Yeah.
And I just stopped going to the gym and I couldn't figure out why. Right. Because what happened is I would go and I would drive around for 25 minutes trying to find parking. And like now it's taken 25, 30% for me to get there. And I'm still only getting that 20 to 25 back, which means the gym was a net loss.
Yeah.
And if I went and I couldn't find parking and I said, F it, I'm done. I've drained myself to 2%. I got to go home before my battery shuts down. Now I've wasted my battery and I didn't accomplish anything.
Yeah.
And so I go over this with people to say, start to really honestly track your battery. Know what each one of these activities costs you or doesn't, and be honest with yourself. Because if I come home at the end of the day and I'm at 12% battery, I can't get to the gym. This isn't I don't want to. This isn't I don't have the motivation. And there's two options there. One, I start feeling guilty or bad or getting down on myself. That opens that app, which is going to drain my battery and get me further from being able to get to the gym. Or I can go in a different direction and say, I'm under 15%. Okay, so what gets me 3% back? What is my 3% activity? And by the way, when I'm at 12%, that's not a time to start figuring that out. I need to take the time to figure that out before and know, well, if some part of me is like, what gets me 3%, hanging a flat screen on the wall. So I'm going to go do that for my friend next door who can't do it for themselves. Sorry, had to come back to that, but
it's okay.
I mean, it's a terrible example because that's
way
more than a 3% activity.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, as I'm watching it, I can't give you any grief because, I've hung most of my TVs. It would have taken me infinitely longer to hang that TV.
It was very quick.
He came in, did it, and was gone. I was like, oh, well, damn.
He hung two. He hung another one in the other room too.
And that's unreal. Yeah.
$200.
So that would have been happy. Yeah. See, and that's the thing. That would have been
$200 for two TVs. It's worth it.
Yeah.
Do you think he can get you hung, or you're just at a loss? Okay.
No.
Okay. It's all right.
but so anyway, with the battery, it's just I tell people, find out figure out okay, so is it a cup of coffee? Is it stretching? Is it a meditation? Is it, know what your 2, 3,
but
4,
understand
5%.
It's work. It's work to charge the battery. That's what I think people need to accept and acknowledge. And even when people say, I just don't like working out, I don't like exercising, because you haven't done it.
Well, and because in the beginning, it is a bigger battery drain.
Sure. Yeah. And it's I don't like going to the gym, but I like how I feel afterwards. And the only reason I know that is because I've practiced doing it. I mean, nobody just inherently loves pushing themselves in the gym.
No.
I mean, maybe some 21-year-olds who are just super stoked about their Instagram handle and posting pictures of themselves, or they have a bunch of other single friends who have nothing to do but go to the gym and boost each other's egos.
But that happened because they tried it and they saw what the result was going to be.
Yeah, there was something.
Yeah.
There's always going to be that resistance.
Genuinely love it.
Yeah,
learned that at some point. They learned it, witnessed it, saw it. Like, you know, I mean, if you grow up with a parent who's like, you know, who wakes up on a Saturday and is basically like, hey, you know, like we're going to go do that, like, you know, 20-minute, I was going to say hike, but like nice walk, or we're going to like, then you learn at a young age, this is a good, valuable, like, you know, thing to do when I'm feeling stressed or difficult. Right. Like, you know, and so there are some people that genuinely love it, but that's the same category. It drives me nuts when people are like, oh, I couldn't even eat French fries. They're disgusting to me. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're delicious.
No, they're not.
You have learned internally what the cost benefit is.
Yeah, you've watched too many. You've watched too many morbidly.
Yeah,
you've watched too many morbidly obese people eat French fries
while
breathing heavy, and that's why.
But you can have French fries and still be healthy. You just have to, you know. So I think that the issue is with that battery. It's kind of saying like you have to know you can't just have one exercise like plan or routine. Because if you have one exercise routine and that requires 25% battery, the problem is we don't budget honestly. Everybody wants to believe they have more battery than they have, right? So what happens is people wake up and they go, great, I'm going to work 8 hours, but really they're going to work 10. You know, I'm going to take a really nice lunch break and go for a walk. No, you're not. Like, I'm not going to talk to any of the people that bother me. I'm just going to stalk them on Facebook. I'm going to so people will say, okay, I've budgeted out and I can get all this done in a day. The problem is, no, you can't. And if you've budgeted for what you would need 130% battery for, then shockingly, if you put exercise at the end of your day, it's not going to happen. And similarly, if you put it at the beginning of your day, then you're going to end your day being like, well, because I went to the gym, I didn't get these other 4 or 5 things done, which means now I have a negative association with the gym.
Yep.
So sometimes it's basically saying, right, if I want to work out 3 days a week, I can't have the same budget and the same schedule for all 7 days of my week.
Yeah.
Because that wouldn't make any sense. That would be like somebody saying like, oh, well, Thursday is a totally normal work day for me, but I'm also going to play golf. What? Like where?
Yeah,
like,
wow.
Like, what are you talking about? Like, it does, like you're going to work while you're golfing like this. So, and it's a bummer because people don't like that, you know, listen, adult life aging is like when you get a brand new phone, the battery lasts forever. And kids, they only have like, they don't have like a, you know, a worry about your house app. They don't have a like,
there's no,
so they have fewer apps and a brand new battery. They can go forever.
Yeah.
As we get older,
I like that.
Yeah. The battery, naturally, the battery capacity decreases slightly. And we have more and more complicated apps and stuff on the phone. So it doesn't run quite as quickly. It doesn't like, and people don't budget. You know, years ago, I had my own like aha moment where it was like the whole phrase, don't cry over spilled milk. We pretend that's about kids. It's not. It's about us.
Yeah.
Right. Kids cry when they spill something because we get pissed.
We freak out. Yeah.
Right. Why do we get pissed? Well, because if I budgeted 15% battery to get my kids dressed, fed, and out the door to go to school, the second one of them spills something, and that goes from 15 to 25, I didn't budget that.
Yeah.
Which means that now is threatening my whole day. And coming back to what we were talking about way back of the like culturally what's expected, it's expected that people are supposed to just max out their battery all the time, which means every day people are waking up with not enough battery to get done what's on their list, which means every day, right? Like this happens to people throughout the week. Like they will start off on Monday with like, okay, I woke up at 90% battery. By Tuesday, it like 80, 70, it decreasing by the end of the week. You're just trying. And then people are like, well, now I need the weekend to recharge. And so it takes some effort to basically say like, right, like it's with the kids, like that's why on a Saturday, if one of my kids spills something, I'm like, oh, no big deal. Don't worry about it. Like, no, we all spill things. Why? Because I don't have anything on my schedule.
And then later
I have the battery capacity.
And you beat them later when you have more energy.
Right.
Do you say they beat me? Yes.
No, you beat them. You're like, hey, remember earlier when you spilled the milk? All right, get over here. But in the moment, you're showing them kindness, which is nice.
Right.
Yeah, and
Well,
I think stress is also illuminates the kind of person you are. Like I think COVID
Yeah.
was like one of those situations where we saw people's true colors. I think stress is what becomes a mirror of who you really are as a person. Like if you're somebody who can stay cool, calm, and collected during a stressful time in the most stressful periods, like that's probably who you are naturally, and that's probably how you're going to respond. No, there's always going to be degrees and it lives on a spectrum. Like some people, like where is the tolerance for stress? Some people it's much higher. For other people, it could be something as simple as like you cut me off on the way to work, and now I'm just going to destroy the whole day.
well, and in some ways, that's what when people you talk about another, I know we had said gaslighting is a buzzword, but when we talk about masking, right, like which is another kind of current buzzword, that's what I think about it. That is like, how much are you masking kind of that your true self? And the more you're masking, the more battery it takes.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I almost think of that, like if you put that on a spectrum of like your totally genuine self to full performance mode, we're always somewhere in between there. And I'd argue for a lot of people, they never get really, really close to their true, genuine self. By the time you hit a certain age, it's almost impossible or hard to just know what you truly want without all the other BS and all the other. And yeah, in some settings, you have to be more performance mode. That takes that takes more battery. And so those are the friends when people say gaslighting or masking, it's kind of a like when you see somebody and they're really under stress and something ugly comes out, it's like, oh, they're trying to keep that in like often.
Yeah.
And
It's like
unless you start addressing it, like you can't sustain that forever.
yeah, I love how Jim Carrey said it. Like being depressed is you need a deep rest from this avatar that you're trying to portray. Like that's all that is. Your body finally recognized you need a deep rest. You cannot keep playing this avatar and putting this front on. I think that's such a great way to say it.
Yeah. And so my biggest recommendation would be like take a pause, look at your battery, look at what are the drains, what are the things that charge, and are you really reasonably budgeting? Are you being honest with yourself? Because if really what we're saying in some ways is if somebody is like, you know what, I want the outcome of a 30% battery workout, but I only have 3% battery available. Well, then you can't be shocked if you're like, well, I did my stretching routine, which is supposed to be my warm up, and then the kids needed me, and this happened, and that happened, and like, well, but that's just because you literally didn't budget for it, and it sucks. It sucks because to budget for it and prioritize it means other things at times have to be pushed further down, and it's hard to get to a place where you can do that.
Yeah, man. I think that's such a great analogy. I don't know if you can hear the thunderstorms on my end or not, but probably not. Hopefully, it's a good enough microphone that's blocking it out. I think it's such a great analogy that everybody can understand, and it's like a good takeaway for anybody who's feeling in this conflicted space of like, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? We'll start looking at the things that are draining your battery. Every compartment of your life is a different app. Some apps are going to take more battery. Some apps are going to take less, but maybe you're using that app more and you need to use it less. Some of the apps you can't turn off because career, family, things like that. But maybe you can dial it down a bit and delegate some stuff so that you can schedule that time. You have to have those serious conversations with your spouse so that you can create the time for you to recharge your battery at the gym, understanding that the gym and our nutrition is a necessity, that it's a necessity. Like we need to maybe even stop sugarcoating it. Like we try to say things to try to be nice, but like, hey, you do what you want, live your life how you want. But at the end of the day, it is a necessity. If people are not it drives me nuts. I've been thinking more and more about it as we wrap up is you'll see these people who, and I wish they understood it. I know they have good intentions. It's not about them and their character, but very obese people wearing hoodies that say mental health matters. And to miss the fact that you're never going to have great mental health unless you are taking some care of yourself physically. And it sounds like a BS thing, but I think people in your community, in your field, recognize how necessary movement and nutrition is for mental health.
Yeah. I think what Aram was saying before about stress, right? Like stress and anxiety it's so fascinating because we talk about it like a mental health issue, which gives the impression that this is just a thinking issue.
Yeah, it's just in your head. Yeah.
But the reality is anxiety it is physiological.
Yeah, there's energy
Right?
built
Like,
up that you're not getting out in a physical sense.
Right.
Yep.
So
It's
how
the
else is it
same
going to
as
come
like,
out?
right. With almost anything like diagnostically, right? It's just a description, right? We come up with a diagnosis like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. It is a description of a bunch of symptoms, but it made it easier to write it short, right? So now you can say, instead of saying, oh, the person experiences cramping, food sensitivity, occasional urgency, but we've ruled out this and this. You don't want to write that every time.
Yeah.
So we just called it IBS. Anxiety is a description of physiological variables, increased heart rate, increased muscle tension, and it impacts the body. I mean, with pain patients, I'm teaching stress reduction techniques and using biofeedback where I can show them.
Fibromyalgia.
Yep. So I can show people, I hook people up to a monitor. I have them do breathing techniques, meditation, and at the end of it, I pull it up on the computer screen. They can see what's happening in my circulation, my heart rate. And I've had people come in who are like, all right, Josh, I'm doing this ridiculous thing you asked me to, and it's not doing anything. And I'm like, all right, let's see. And I hook them up and they do it for 10 minutes and they look and they're like, oh, well, my breathing regulated, my heart rate regulated, I increased circulation, which decreases inflammation. And all of a sudden now it has this moment where people are like, oh, so it's not just something you're saying like, oh, do this thing. And I swear, well, like it's not magic, it's physiology.
Yeah.
And
when we say it's in your head, it's not that you're making it up. It's in your head, as in the stressors that are going on in your brain are causing this physiological response in your body of pain, discomfort, poor digestion, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gut health is incredibly impacted by stress and tension and nutrition. And like, it's unreal.
Yeah. Everybody's worried about cholesterol, but stress is a bigger cause of a heart attack than cholesterol is.
Yeah. I mean, the combination also isn't great, but in general, I think that it's really taking a look at if you want to be at your highest level of performance in life, it involves having to set aside time for all these things. And yeah, they take time and energy and effort. And the best model I've heard that is like as simple as possible is that, I saw this presentation where somebody had a picture of a bar stool, a 3-legged stool, and said right now, at least in the US, right? And I'm sure you guys have probably heard some variation of this, but there's kind of these 3 legs to the stool, of self-care or health. One is preventative medical care, going to see your doctor, blood work, medications. The other is interventions, things that you need. You have a broken bone, surgeries. And this guy basically said the third part is self-care. And we want those first 2 legs to take care of everything because they're the easiest often and they're the quickest. But what he said is if you shortchange self-care, that bar stool will never be as sturdy as it could be. It's always going to be a little bit wobbly. But people don't want to do that because that's what takes work and effort and time and energy. And if you have budgeted your battery to not have room for it, then that's where people will be like, oh, I don't have time for this surgery.
Because I
don't have time for PT.
It's all on them, where their job, there's a boss, the family, there's a spouse and kids. You are showing up for somebody else. With the self-care part, it's all on you. So if you're not doing it on your own, hire somebody that you have to meet. Join a yoga class that you have to go to. Get a trainer, a coach that holds you accountable to it in some way. This was an awesome conversation. I feel like we should do this again. Even talk about that brain-body connection, the mind-body connection, and things like that, maybe another time. But this was, I think people can definitely walk away with a lot of tangible things to be thinking about, action steps that they can take. Do you offer services to people online at all? Are you all in person?
No, I'm actually now all online.
Okay. So people can reach out to you on Instagram, which we'll have obviously linked in the show notes.
People should feel free because I'm going to start doing more, if there's not a lot of great stuff came out of the pandemic, but some of the good stuff is that I now do online groups, which is awesome because now it's,
this year he's only charging $3 an hour. So get in now before his rates go up after this podcast. Yeah, man.
And I would love to come back. This is awesome. It's a fun conversation.
Yeah, no, this was great, man. We have another one that's coming up. We're guests on somebody else's show, but I think
We're
it's still a
popular,
good amount of
Josh. We're
time. I think it's a
super
great amount of
popular.
time for people to be able to walk away with a lot of solid info, man. This was great. It was awesome meeting you. I asked that one question. We have one question.
Hold on, I'm excited
go
to
ahead.
see him in October.
Yeah, that'll be
I get to
that'll be
finally.
nice. I get to meet you in person.
Yeah,
maybe I'll
I'm
go.
not that. No, I would prefer if you didn't, but that's
Maybe
fine.
I'll guess that he has someone to hang out with, like, when you abandon
Bring it on. Come
people
on.
for the shrimp club.
He's
Yeah,
gonna. Don't you live in Dallas?
Who, me? No, I'm
Yeah.
outside of Boston.
yeah.
Oh,
Couldn't you tell from his
shit.
accent? What do you think? He just moved there?
Boston.
Oh,
Come
all
on.
right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What?
You abandoned us. Ron used to be
I'm from
Northeast.
Connecticut originally.
Oh,
Yeah.
where about?
Stanford.
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 Yeah. So yeah, you guys will see each other October. Maybe I'll be there. Probably not now because Ron hurt my feelings. Ron, did you have any
wait,
questions?
are you? You're on the East Coast, so we could literally just get together.
Yeah, we'll just meet up in Stanford. That's what we'll do. We'll meet up.
That's actually like a perfect meeting point, I bet.
Yeah, we'll do that, and then we'll hang out with all his old friends, and we'll send pictures of us giving him the finger. That'll be perfect.
But I'll come back anytime you guys want to have me. This is awesome.
Yeah, no, this was great. And then we have one question that we ask every guest. So you will be compared to all the others. All right. You ready? All right. Bye.